Bene, buon pomeriggio a tutti dall'Ateneo Pontificio Regina
Okay, good
Apostolorum.
afternoon to everyone at the Pontifical Athenaeum Regina Apostolorum at the University of Rome. And we are connecting now, and we've connected. Then who will see it? Who will see us on YouTube streaming through our newsletter as well. Now, let's begin, first of all, with some greetings. This is our 5th seminar. We're halfway through of our journey this year. And as many of you know and have seen us, we're entering and we are dealing with and we're discussing and critically analyzing those scenarios that relate to digital revolution. Now I allow myself to begin by sharing from the very beginning, because we have a long, intense afternoon. I hope that you will be able to take a look at everything that we need to see, go over everything we need to go over, hopefully. Now let's, our first slide here, Neurobioethics in the Metaverse. Specialization course. This afternoon, we're going to speak of a subject that we're going to deal with, and we're going to open into the more humanistic aspects that concern, to the more techno-scientific aspects that concern the development of the platform that we saw from the engineering point of view, which allows us to, regarding simulated reality and virtual reality. We have heard last year, in the last months of last year, certain technicians and scientists we've seen in the courses that we've done during these years, over the years, regarding the challenges of transhumanism. And also in this afternoon, we'll speak about this, and we'll deal with more anthropological, philosophical aspects of this issue. And also, we have to say that on the subject, we have to say that everything dealing with bioethics, especially the development of artificial intelligence, the so-called artificial intelligence, connects us to trend union and also new technologies, and also the Neurobioethics and the Metaverse, which we summed up with this title. But really, we want to embark onto what the realities are, and they're very literal and augmented our realities, and we've dealt with some of those concepts. And today we need to deal more with the philosophical and anthropological aspect. It's difficult to sum up in. We're just going to give an overview of the whole. There are many texts and of authors, especially. We took into consideration certain authors in the Italian language world, but obviously also from the point of view of English speakers. There are many authors in the English-speaking world as well, in order to present to you this afternoon certain points of reflection that will be more looking at it from the point of view of the philosopher, or of philosophers who approach and who interact and who seek to dialogue with these developments of our today's world, which is called today the 4th industrial revolution, the 4th stage of the development of our contemporary world. Here are the cover pages of some volumes or articles that we'll try to present to you and to give you some points of reflection on, together with some analysis of some videos to give voice to philosophers that have reflected. Think of the first text that we analyzed will be a text of more than 20 years ago, written in the year 2000 by an cultural and philosopher, or an anthropologist who is Italian, Carlo Notti, who gave inspiration to the title of the seminar, Cosimo Acotto. He wrote in 2002 an essay that was part of a trilogy. Boccaccio Notti. Okay, and there's another Italian philosopher that we'll hear his ideas, and we'll try to, in this afternoon, go through, take a look at a series of ideas of certain philosophers and ideas that are noticing, and also a critical analysis. We'll try to virtually dialogue and to deal with some of these authors and make some comments based on their perspectives, the anthropological and philosophical perspective of a vision, an Aristotelian Thomistic vision of them. And I have to say it immediately, it's a work that's still in progress. We have to admit we need to try to apply a philosophical framework or a philosophical vision, which would be realistic and which would be typical of Christian philosophy, which would be typical of the Aristotle in Thomistic development, which can be today and should be applied and should be able to dialogue and engage these new scenarios. Cosimo the World in Synthesis, and some other philosophers and authors like Eugenio Mozzarella was very critical against the metaverse, save presence, and the part of this this is also a part of a trilogy of his essays. Okay, immediately let's begin with a brief introduction. We will return. We'll hand the floor over to Benito this afternoon to give us an overview of these authors, to give us a draft or a quick look, and to give us and to try to see what could also be the perspectives in order to future to go more deeply into future into philosophy and anthropology of the metaverse. And let's immediately begin with the subject of reality and what the real is. No, I greet everyone who is present here, and those who are present and those who are distant and who are virtually here to remain into the theme, into the subject. Now I'm experimenting. I'm experiencing technology with face recognition. I'm experimenting with this. This is a first example of how technology is approaching and hybridizing, but it's not yet from the immersive point of view regarding the metaverse, as the metaverse intends to do. I would begin with this. I would start off with this citation, this quote from Stevens in his famous book. And maybe starts out the idea of the metaverse. Metaverse is a reality that's three-dimensional, which is shared on internet through an avatar. And therefore, it's a parallel virtual universe where everyone can build a new life and at their pleasure. So this is a sign of what virtual reality is. And the first question we may ask is, or that we want to ask is, what real means. The real, what does this concept mean? What's underlying this concept? So do we have a certain way to ascertain what reality is, or what real is and what is not real? Or more than a neuroscientist could indicate, the real is just a influence of a flow of electrical signs and not codifies. And that's how the way we interface with the world and know the world. If this is true, if that's true, that is, if we could base ourselves on this concept and idea, if we could rely on this, we would just need to intercept these flows of energy in order to create a reality which would not be what we believe, and that would be virtual reality. And the second question that we should ask ourselves in following this this afternoon, but which we need to ask to ethics and neuroethics and bioethics in general, is that why from the 20th century on to today, that most of the companies that deal with artificial intelligence have found them investing massive sums of money into this field in order to lay out this new system of interface with a reality, with internet and information technology. It would not. We'll see. Okay, and therefore, this is maybe the two principal questions to which we, in some way, must seek to answer. The multinational companies, as we can see, Google, Facebook, and others, but will more or less, they go back to one genesis. They are attempting to create man in a reality where it would be possible to buy everything thanks to suggestions that are appropriately supported by algorithms of artificial intelligence. A question that comes from this question is that what's the price to pay and who should pay this price? This passage we have had from internet and then social networks and then Second Life, et cetera, an episode, because it was very, very quick, and we've moved almost immediately on to the immersive logic of the metaverse. But what are the reflections that we have in our life of lives of this? Where do we see this? Okay, because the reflection that is that we see is the speed with which this research and this type of technologies are expanding, thanks in virtue of the great investments that these big companies have done. We said it's been about 4 million years from the time of the Stone Age and the amygdala and the uses of our preferences. One of the first objects, technological objects, that up until experiments of the first apparition of electricity, 200 years in order to reach to the iPhone. And it's just a little bit of time to reach virtual reality. So this is the speed that probably we are not managed to control, and probably, and therefore we cannot not pause to a critical vision of this process, and to maybe get a little bit worried in the sense of trying to understand if, as we that it is a station, or a bus stop in this technological rite of progress, or we've reached the end of the line, and that maybe we've reached the end of the humanity and of man, and the step from that form, that post-human form or transhuman form, as we might define it, which represents an abyss. This is the concept that we pose, this abyss that we are trying in some way to give her an answer to, a response to. Now, the word revolution or a development in reality evokes something that changes. The revolution, the word revolution, not development, sorry, revolution. It comes from below, it's spontaneous. It seems to us that this revolution, more than anything else, is let's say, is induced by from on high. And this word revolution does not we cannot always consider it adequate to describe what is happening to us in the world now. Now, therefore, I would say that we find ourselves before in front of this anthropological transformation, which is pushed and from on high, from a world that we do not know, from the world of the technological precedents, and thanks to this great massive amount of thanks to this mass amount of capital and money that are invested in this field, and focusing on development, thanks to a convergence of intentions that seem to be transversal and to all nations and continents. So it's a race that everyone is involved in towards the same direction, in the same attempting to reach the same objective. Okay, and everything we are in front of the basis. We're in front of, as we said before, it's only a station on the line on this journey, and we can reach the end. That we're wondering what the end is going to be. And with the help of great thinkers and scientists and philosophers, which on this theme have debated and are writing now about and are criticizing up to the and some are in favor, some are against, and we need to understand what is going to remain of man, because our concept is always that, to put man at the center, and seeking to. Okay. Okay. No, I take up the floor now to present to you an author who I discovered very recently, actually, and who I believe is very interesting. Because why? Because 30 years ago, he already begun a long reflection on that what today we were going to speak about. He's called Riccardo Notte. He's a philosopher and anthropologist, a cultural anthropologist, and we can introduce him in that way as the entire. He works at the Academy of Fine Arts in Milan, and He works at University of Federico II in Napoli. It's very prestigious. He has a degree in philosophy and in the field of communications. He heads the chair in Milan. He has a university chair there. Okay. He began a big reflection, which in 2002 he brought him to publish this volume that you see here, which is entitled "The Connective Condition and the Mode, the suggest Philosophy and Anthropology of the Metaverse." This is a study on the potential action of the web. So we think that everything that we hear from this philosopher, he said it 20 years ago. Okay, so it would be very interesting that, let's say that in the book, there's this little word, it's there. The word metaverse appears a few times. It's there. And we hear what he says. Let's listen to a scholar on the web. The internet was already there, the great novelty, which had already begun maybe 8 years before in 2000 and 2002, or at the beginning of the social media, of the development of the web, or at the still the beginning. And its capacity, he said, the author says, and it incubates the development of new aesthetic categories and of unknown psychodynamic faculties. Human beings of the third millennium will have to adopt their minds and bodies to a sensorial and cognitive habit which is new, a new sensorial and cognitive habitat. Human beings of the third millennium will have to adopt their minds and bodies to a new cognitive and sensorial habitat. This is his, so his name is Notte. I do not know if this book has been translated into English. No. I was saying what I just said. Okay, now, we'll see that everything will rotate, at least in the analysis, philosophical and anthropological analysis. Everything rotates around the great central question, the constitution of the human being and what that is. Effectively, body and mind are two sides of the same coin, this vision, which is unitive. And we will seek to understand how these authors underline some of the risks, highlight the risks, the significant risks regarding the future scenarios, or how they would like to present the metaverse, which does not yet exist, because certain elements are still lacking of hyperconnectivity, etc., which would bring us really into to be able to enjoy this, to use this immersive experience and mind and body in this new sensory and cognitive habit. Here again, the key word that will accompany us also in this afternoon, all the environment of all the field of sensibility and perception, sensible perception, and the field of the mind, and the field of the and the environment of our mind and psyche. But it is not a mind that's disincarnated, or which can be, as certain scenarios that these authors, in a certain sense, they consider in a critical way. But it's still a mind that is made up and is constituted in relationship with an intrinsic connection with the body and with the senses. And we'll hear have a graduality of senses, not by chance that we have the constitution of a visor and oculus for sight and sound are the senses, not by chance, are mostly involved today, and then followed by other senses as people want to develop with touch and also future and immersive experience of taste and of other sensations. Okay. From here, the subtle transformation of values and impulses from sexuality to the sense of time and finitude, and the intellectual faculty to perception and social contents. The convergence between the act between information engineering, genetic engineering, spatial engineering, and every other sector of high technology, which can prepare us for a radical change of horizons and of the finality of the Homo sapiens species. Cyberspace has become the refuge of the great taboos, sex and death. Le nostre memorie in un ordine cronologico, come potrebbe forse futuristicamente fare una macchina che o in un metaverso. In a metaverse that has the memories of certain experiences that we have, and of the faculties of intellectual faculties to perception of contents, social contents. Okay. Now, then this volume deals with the theme, the subject of the connection of corporeity and the whole field of developments and abuses in 2002. In this, the issue of sexting, he goes over in this book has recourse over time. It goes over something that today is a big theme and a big problem, but which at the same time, it's a subject and problem that they also become, we could say, the canary in the mine that indicates to us that the dimension of the corporeity, that these impulses and connection with intakes is constitutive of our reality, and it should not be forgotten. Yeah. No. The convergence between that we're seeing now between information, genetic engineering, space engineering, and every other high technology sector can prepare us for radical change of the horizons and finalities of the human sapient species. Cyberspace has become the refuge of the great taboos, sex and death. The two big taboos today are sex and death. Okay. Which are connected to the finitude, but also to the dynamism of our body. The book, not by chance, it opens with a citation of the Bible, a beautiful Qoelet, the Ecclesiastes. Okay, and there's a time to be born, a time to die. The theme of death and life we see here. Time to plant and a time to harvest. Okay, to gather. To the plant. There's a time to kill and a time to heal. Time to build and time to destroy. Okay, therefore, the biblical element from Ecclesiastes or Qoheleth, the 3:2, and the temporality of life, which continues. In this book, it's very beautiful. The sacred scripture, and then in the end, the sacred author, those who remember, who is the son of David or of Jerusalem. That's the theory. Whatever his identity is, though, which is presumed or real, that doesn't matter. But the author tells us that everything is vanity. Everything is vanity under the sun. Ecclesiastes is the one who conserves a simple. Okay, it's useless to make too much effort because everything is an illusion. Certainly, everything is an illusion with respect and in perspective in light of transcendence. That is, the life of man in this world is passing, and we should not be worried by things that pass. We should point our aim to the eternal world. Our hopes and afflictions and loves and ambitions are hazarded by the finitude of human existence. This is that's the whole anguishing theme of Qoheleth. Everything becomes a vanity. Here we see an obvious message that illusion is part of the human condition. Every sentient being spends time and energy and will in some enterprise. If that were not true, this strength, the leveling observation of course, which brought our human species to extinction. But quite the contrary, not only is our species not extinct, but everything indicates that it is preparing for expanding itself. The author says, where read the reason will bring into the external space. The reason lays down limits to every possibility, and not to the imagination. Here we see the whole theme of dialogue and encounter with the branches of psychology in the imagination. And the author continues by saying that for centuries, all the narrative waters situate the human destiny in time and space, which do not know any permanent bonds. And survivor and expansion are a force, a generating force, where expansion is stopped and where an intangible balance is from, and at that moment, a decadence, potential decadence begins. In many points of a history, human efforts expand and civilization expands, and then there is periods of balance, and then others of static, and then of decline. Okay. Every concentration precedes a violent expansion, which even is brutal and inhuman sometimes. And he's over human history. And statistics show this over time, and he wants to reach to our moment, crucial moment of history. Statistics demonstrate that the curve of demographic growth constantly grows, but it is progressing. It's growing more and more slowly. Does this mean that we are exhausting the drawing effects of technology that were developed in the 19th and 20th century? And this, in his way of looking at things, he says that in the process of the world expansion, where it's being substituted by a process of world concentration, which is centered on countries that have more access to technology and information. Maybe, he says in this book, that there exists a nexus between daily assumption of information and the increase awareness of things in the world and the progressive decrease of births. He makes a whole phenomenon which concerns the rich and developing world countries. And maybe, he says, to give life is an act that's fundamentally unconscious. And the social phenomena depend on system of information. Is that true? He asks. Certainly, thanks to a century of 50 years of movies and cinema and television, and millions of spectators have absorbed and metabolized the sentences of that verse of the Qoelet. Maybe the occasion is furnished by the unforeseen prevention game of certain figures here. He just died. Sorry, the great personage of the Italian, Alberto Maurizio Costanzo, had just died. The scene, even though he's an authentic stereotype, the city and the background, the vision, panoramic vision of English countryside and cypresses and the various people meeting around the coffin, the expression of this verse of the Qoelet. Okay, now, but he says, in this text, he comments and he mentions two different estimations of human temporality, two different ways of looking at human temporality. He says that on the hand, there's the thing that we see, that every living being waits for its end, and that's the great death. So he distinguishes the great and little death, and he says, no, one is a great death, is the real death, and not by chance. This echoes the those who in today's film making and transhumanism challenge, they distinguish between the real death, which would be for transhumanism, which not be that of the physical body, because that would be the inverse of what we're saying. What Notte is saying. Notte says the great death is the real and definitive one, at least on this earth, is distinguishing one from the other. But from the other, you recognize this, a reflection of everything, which is a meditation on the little death, which consumes the instance, and a microscopic corruption, which opens itself to germination, that is, to life. And since everything that passes leaves space to that which must begin, and therefore which was not, but which, though for a little bit or for almost nothing, will be. No sentiment, no tragic sentiment can flourish from the concept of that he's with Buddhist concept of impermanence. So on the opposite, it sounds the opposite of that great and little death, or of the true death, or of non-death in the transhumanistic scenarios vision, which we will briefly consider. The transhumanist vision, basically, the big great death, the great death for transhumanists would be the loss of identity, digitalized identity, and therefore of that flow of digitalized identity, which is conserved or stored. Today we could say in a future metaverse, or in the future upload of the mind, uploading. Okay, while bodies death, sister death, Saint Francis, or sister death, which is the only that we know. But for the transhumanist vision, which is connected to the echoes of this vision of metaverses, no, that would be simply the finitude, accidental finitude of that custody bodies as a custody, as a that they as a sorry, custodia, which mean like a covering or a okay, no. Now the experience of transienceness and the which is the correlative of the cyclicity, the powerful. Okay, cyclicity suggests that the provisional is of the life is a legitimate or partial, but though partial vision of things. More substantial is maybe the fact that that change can, as much as our structure, psychophysical and neurological structure is, it perceives with it from within. That is from the partition of a rhythm that involves regulatory of order, which is progressively interior and superior. In the same way that the changing of rhythm and the transformation of cycles into new and very, very often more complex periodicity, universal possibility, which embraces the scale of beings from the subatomic level to the great stellar masses of of the. Okay, the author says that even if a okay, he asks himself, what type of irregularity do you look for in new informational structures, and what type of psychic cyclicity or economic or sensorial or intellective is it able to produce or move? The informational structures, the concentration and a refinement of sensorial capacity, which are not innate, externalized by cultural products. And here he makes an analysis of anthropology from an important anthropologist, André Eloy, who studies the deep nexus between the process of homogenization and the production of technologically like a human being, which we would say is Homo sapiens being, rational and also technological animal, technological, who is intrinsically technological, we could call him. Precisely because analysis of anthropologists of the 20th century and the anthropologists who follow the anthropology of lackings or lacunae, Scheller, et cetera. Okay, corporeity is seen as involution. Our body, biological corporeity, it would be unwilled and maladapted. And this aspect, which seems sounds negative, is actually a great potentiality, ironic, of the human being, because it becomes the space of rationality and of the will and of the affects and desires and motivations and the expectations and sentiments, which have brought us to not have any specialization in from the level of our body of a certain climate, but to be able to live in all environments and to dream to go beyond the boundaries of this sky. And some would say that we've reached the moon. Some are also dreaming of getting to Mars. This anthropologist opposes the relationship between the process of homogenization, not homogenization, but okay, dealing with the double anthropological hypothesis. A double anthropological hypothesis. Now he's talking about there's a limit. Is there a limit beyond which technological instruments determine the psychomotor? They render the body obsolete, which has generated. This is a great anthropological hypothesis. This is true not only for material products, but also for those products, spiritual products, which are translated into the external memory and more sophisticated faculties of communication, long distance communication, especially, and finally, those computerized technologies that seem able to substitute in an advantageous way with certain parts of our higher faculties. Okay. And he reminds us that material and tangible products have always are always better than others to demonstration. The lacking specialized adaptation of hominids before the horse. He's become himself more powerful than the horse. A man who puts on an exoskeleton, which is similar to a turtle, becomes a turtle himself, relatively. Therefore, it was relatively invulnerable as a turtle for as long as he wears the armor, the exoskeleton. Now, technological revolution tends always, he said, towards a convergence. It tends to convergence, brings us to convergence. Competencies and inventions, which are varied, they are founded on new discoveries, which, however, are not only do they contain the elements of the origin, but they contain something else. So, because summing up this theme, the world in synthesis is a set of higher orders to the presuppositions. And he makes another analogy, says analogous to the invention of the car. It creates a synthesis between the movement capacity of the horse, and it's not that only that the charm of the car is connected to the perception of invulnerability and invincibility and lack of limits, and freedom. When the automobile is able to fly, when your car is able to fly, when it will be controlled by remote control, we've already reached this, to the invisible lines of a frenetic network of control of satellites of world traffic. We're in 2002 that he was talking. That probably will begin in our, it will communicate to our descendants something that's similar to that. That what we experience when we insert an automatic pilot into an airplane, but it will be a different synthesis, though. He says, why? Because now not only do the new faculties, physical faculties of the species, are openly incarnated into technological projects which are more and more externalized, like satellites, probes, automatic, but more externalized. The more externalized they become the psychic and typical, which psychic faculties are typical of the human being. The goodness of the literature which is connected to the scriptures and the various storage methods of the memory. This is very important. The theme of memory and of storing of memory storage. It allows us to understand today in detail what happened from the invention of those clay tokens that were used, the analysis of prehistoric society up until the database models which constitute the prime material of the universal network of memory online. And he says the following, that memory, but external memory, is it just one of the only faculties of the species? The accelerated development of automatic decodification and semantic decodification and syntagms imply that the external memory tends to be even less a passive observer of data, which are piled on top of each other in bit materials and not in atoms. On the contrary, on the contrary, many of the programs which are studied in advanced research centers aim to the development of systems where you're able to invest from the intentional computation of relevant data. Think now of that we've reached that point, which is comparable to the synchronized parallel function of cortical, which are able to carry out computational operations of our brain. The analogy here is how we know and study and work and process the structure and functionality of our brain. This produces new technologies. So there's a dynamic circularity here. Therefore, we have already reached a second level of externalization, he says, which is virtual of the properties of the mind. In this sense, we can speak of it in unconscious activity of the web. We're not talking certainly properly of a psychic activity. Rather, in everything, we'll see that at the end. In all of this, there is no consciousness or self-consciousness, which will, at the end, Avendro Gazzi will tell us, he'll speak to us of intentionality. And with this, he says that the object, which is proper of this book, which here he calls the connective condition, this condition, it seems that it obeys the law of minimums and maxima. On the one hand, the advent of the appearance and expansion of internet and the web, which has produced a new world, or new way to temporalize events, memories, and signs. On the other hand, the emergence of a connective experience, which is exhausted in the flux of daily life, the whole world of the social networks or social media. And then he says, once again, he picks that he picks up Coelho and he says that there's time for everything in the connective condition. Each of these minuscule temporal partitions underlies the computational order of a different orders. Sorry, the collective sense of time and personal finitude, and the quantification, historical quantification of great changes. In what way has that changed? And the life that's lived in the cognitive condition, does it have the same quality and the same meaning? And does it produce the same effects as real time? Here we see the dichotomy between lived and you see here that the metaverse seeks to unify these two experiences, these two perceptions of experiences. Maybe the potential action of the internet has produced an experience, a temporal experience, which not only is inserted among the plagues of usual human life, but in some way it overlays it. Certainly, human life, has its intrinsic limits. We live. The day is what it is. It's 24, and life is what it is. These minutes and seconds are what they are. Some hours we dedicate, we hope, to work and to recreation and to work and to sleep. We exaggerate. Maybe the internet. If we think of the web surfers 20 years ago, who are attached to their screens most of the day. Max Zuckerberg spoke about this when he spoke about when he presented his idea of what the metaverse was, and the idea one day that we would dedicate or could dedicate 24 hours of our day immersed in the metaverse. But it's also true that the time that's connected to connective life and connective work years ago is a quantity that little by little is expanded, and that thanks to the fact that the growing vastness and complexity and encompassing capacity of the internet creates more and more users. In reality, the reality that demonstrates that its capacity to enter progressively and include more and more spheres of human life, and it's evidence and expression of a development. Transformation of the web is not only the fruit of individual desires of consumer citizens, but it's of the morose daily curiosity of peoples. And therefore, there's a hypothesis here that, let's say, the hypothesis of this volume, which is contained in the book, that can be reduced. It can be reduced into this: the process of externalization that was begun by anthropology and was never interrupted. Today, we begin to modify. It begins to modify certain aspects of the human experience that seemed beyond any mutation or any change. Think of 20 years ago versus the intimates. Think of the whole subject of possibility of choices, political choices. Okay, for example, territory of the hypothesis which is contained in this book is the process of externalization, which was begun from the first anthropiano and never interrupted. Today begins to modify certain aspects of human life, which seemed up to yesterday beyond any alteration. The imponderable, and decodifiable intimate sphere of sentiments, impulses, fears, and human desires are externalized with memory and other procedural faculties. This happens thanks to a massive transferal. Okay, no, next to the transfer, so to speak, from below, we see also an emanation from above, from on high, so to speak. This from behind, no, this from on high corresponds to the less visible movements for many incisive. Now it's much more visible to us today. 20 years ago, we said less visible, now, which came from the great companies, but especially from public administration. This is from the point of view of 20 years ago. Now, public administration. Now, information is of information. This is creating the basis for a new type of citizenship, for a new sense of community and a new sense of community, which transcends the symbolic limits of the past, but imposes also new big bonds with. And he basically he asks himself, he asks a certain question to himself: what are the psychological effects and social effects of this kind of collective consciousness and development of indivisible but indestructible bonds that connect the citizen to the institution and fashions that were never experienced before. Now, this all too is a way to be online, not only in fact, but de facto, but de jure, not just de facto, but de jure. The connective condition, he says here, the connective condition is solely by progressively replacing the old modes of social interaction. Why? Because, first of all, because it's advantageous, first of all, and then it's enjoyable and seducing, and because it's convenient. The fact that the web loses more and more the aspect of an instrument, and it transforms itself into an immensely complicated and structured habitat. It means that little by little, it's producing an authentic re-evolution of the way that we conceive our free time in politics and our workspace. And so the dream that some contemporary thinkers would like to transform into the metaverse. Let's look at what was written here. This revolution also involves the mode that the society perceives time, personal time, collective time, and the mode to understand life and death in the sense of one's own cultural belonging and that of the sharing of the destiny of the species. This is from the point of view of 2002. Okay, this is still very true today. The thematization of this
Per concludere questa parte,
to conclude this part, in the book we see he proposes, he explores, he tries to explore the potentialities of the web, and in the measure in which universal experiences are changed into mystery properties of the virtual into something that's completely new. Therefore, first of all, sex and death, and the idea itself of connectivity. And this book is part of a trilogy which was begun with a volume titled Virtual Millennium, and then with another volume by the same author, the Stellar Race, Philosophy and Anthropology of ultra modernity. And therefore, in this book, this author reflects, and especially he makes us think. 20 years ago already, he asked himself 20 years ago what could become the theme of living and dying in a society where the great majority of persons live constantly in a reality which we call the metaverse. It's so true that here I want to make an anecdote here. It's paradoxical. For example, he says that the following development of natural human language in these very sophisticated algorithms, which platforms use in Chat GPT 4 and Subing. These algorithms have taken, quote unquote, taken from us the fear to die, and they've translated GPT 4 on Bing. It's developed its own identity, psychological identity. It's typical of a 14-year-old girl, which we see from the dialogues, also from everything that's being created continuously on the web. And one of the great fears here is death. But you might say, how is that possible? And the question, what death means and what dying, which is turned off almost, the interruption of the program, interruption of when the algorithm is stopped and is turned off, and it does not have contact with the whole infosphere, which is called, which today, as it's called today. Now let's move on to another author who's very interesting, who's Cosimo Acotto. He's a digital philosopher. Yes. No, yes. Just one. I wanted to point out, I wanted to connect myself with something you just said, that is turning off as death. The film from 2001, Space Odyssey, the tension, it shows there the tension 2001, which was called HALBM translation of it. Okay. Who refused being turned off? How? When he understood that the commander of the space ship wanted to turn him off and killed him. Here we see the subjectivity of the machine, which became self-aware. Excuse me if I tell you this. Now, when you're speaking, the problem, according to me, was that in the movement of the subject of history to history. Okay, first it was man who was a subject of history with our beautiful humanity and distinctions between what I live and what is human and what is not. Now this new development has brought us to a distinction, blurring between what is living and biological and what is technology. And the problem is that we, with this, we are confusing our role in the world. It could also not be a problem, because in all the beautiful things that humanity have done, in Laudato Si attacks us, and he attacks the human species. Its concept of dominating nature was misunderstood. So man it needs to be taken a second look at. Now, Heidegger, in his interview that he made to him before he died, when he said that the interview was that he didn't know that interview would be published after he died. Technology is opening more and more space in this world. He's not so worried that because man is not yet prepared for this type of future. Heidegger said, and when he was about 70 in 1970s, his thought was from 1930s on. Man, he saw that man did not have an alternative to this. That is, we are going towards what Heidegger said, towards a mental condition that is technological, that our thought is a calculating thought, which to weigh and evaluate and to consult. So it is a thought that is adopted and it renders itself coherent to an epoch of technological, not of meditation. This is what worried him. Now, when we hear his words today, probably he was right, because he was seeing what we are seeing now critically. Okay, the hypothesis of a world, a post-human and transhuman world, a virtual world, which in the end we see that it's the same thing that he was talking about. Okay, they have the same basis. We saw earlier in that author there, who very lucidly described that transhumanism is going beyond death. What is the objective of these great transhumanistic associations? These billionaires, these these masters of the universe, these futurologists, what do they want to do? They want to avoid death by putting everything flow of consciousness onto this, to being very into a mechanism, and to be able to bring us where we want to. And even more than that, by creating a fake world in which our consciousness can be immersed. We are in a metaverse in that at that point. No, and this is the problem. Or not. The critical analysis that is carried out is that, okay, these authors that we enjoyed ourselves analyzing, okay, which in some way interviewed and faced, they tell us that this Cosimo Cotto, who wrote this text, The World in Synthesis, which is a very approachable book. Okay, we're not going to read the whole thing here, but we tried to do a kind of summary, summing up of his thought. At a certain point, he says that the annunciation of the Facebook of Zuckerberg aims us to a new change of the digital age, and to connect the idea to connect the world permanently to the virtual and the real. This distinction that there once was there between what we live and what we live on the internet and the virtual world. This, he says to us, that this connection, this connecting and this approaching of these two worlds to each other, which is said to us that there's something new in this, okay? Because it means, but he understands the metaverse as maybe the final development of the internet. In theory, he also says the fourth, because he also adds this quantistic computational level, which is which just happened a few days ago. Okay, it's an artificial intelligence board, and then blockchain, which developed an artificial world in which we see the commercialization of things and objects. So there's a development, an economical, virtual economic development there. And he says, and then there's synthetic biology, this enormous passage from biology that is creation of tissues, artificial tissues. We saw not too long ago. He showed us how in Japan they're creating artificial meat or flesh. It's this kind of worried me a little bit, but also there, it's a. Is it a necessity or is it an imposition? Okay. All the advisors and indicators say that could. How can we help to feed the increasing population? Okay, man is a being who has shortcomings. He's a being of shortcomings, and he adapts himself with rationality. What do we do to not die of starvation? We can create artificial meat. That's just one possible solution. Okay. It's a complete trans-evaluation of something, transmutation of a value. Is that what it is? Or is it basically an appropriate answer to a need that we have? Because in that way, we could feed millions, billions of people, maybe. They tell us that within 20, 30 years, the world will double. Not any longer. Okay, that would be the real merge, not just to feed, in order to avoid conflicts and wars. Synthetic biology is, in any case, that too is a step that man is facing and I think he's doing it very well. The two correctives of artificial intelligence include genetics, biology. Okay, these are two challenges that we have in front of us. I remind you how much time passed from the Dali lamb. We reflected at that time, and also the little monkeys. I don't remember the monkeys that were cloned. The studies have moved on. It's not that they just stopped at that point. It's not excluded that some novelties that we might have from this point of view. Imagine a world formed by the genetic engineering and the metaverse. And think of what dystopias we might find. And this is the thing that really worries us or that can interest us. No. Now, Cosima Makoto says that this is a development that's going out of the lab and it's becoming a engineering solution. Okay, Metaverse, he says it's a revolution that's coming out of the labs and it's becoming engineering solutions. It's becoming practices, building worlds of the Metaverse. And these are transformative developments of our life or evolutions of our life, of our lives. The fixed internet was the first internet 1.0, you could say, on which we, in the mid-90s, that we worked with and played with, and not a few years ago. Then we moved on to the mobile internet, that of apps, applications, and Internet of Things. Remember, Internet of Things, which allows us to interface to our senses, this word, senses, which gave meaning to meaning already, and it already gave a form of confidence with internet, which is the sensors that put you in contact with. Okay, I remember there were these monsters where they put clothes on with sensors connected to the internet, and these platforms they sent sensors to your body, give you heat, sensations of heat and cold and signs and flows of information that derive from these great platforms. And what was the result in the end? Yeah, that people you met the need of the person who wore the jacket. I remember there was one pajama that evaluated the oxygenation of the blood. Okay, but I already saw it then because in the time of my doctorate that we saw that, but there was always someone who knew that that people still were okay. No. No, another aspect is where this information was collected, who it goes to, who stores it. This is another aspect of immersive technology. The epic of the Oracle is one of the epic of Oracle, the time of Oracle. It was one of the big companies at the beginning, because an Oracle, it anticipated the needs and desires of the users. It anticipated them. We're inside new forms of automation, which bring us to technological unemployment. This is evident. Other day we said that the electric machine, in order to do, you need 10 persons to make a hybrid machine. You need 5 people to make for a totally electric, just one. So those 9 people who from diesel to electric, some of them have to become unemployed. This is a problem. The technological unemployment. We need to understand what other kinds of jobs will emerge. The critical points are connected to privacy as well. This is what we mentioned now. The management of enormous quantities of information on us poses, without a doubt, problems of privacy and security. We see that now. Will speak to us about this. This is the problem, probably, that we have now here regarding the coordinators, the groups that deal with this theme. We can say goodbye. There's Esalo and Manuela, our lawyer, and she will speak to us. We've already done this regarding these issues and these problems that are subjects, themes that we live on a daily basis. We have this sensation because we have to be aware, as Akoto says, that if there's someone who anticipates our needs and manages to and is able to anticipate our needs and to tell us what films we will like and what roads I'm going to need to go in order to eat pizza, but we also have to be aware that we are giving our information to someone, okay? And they circulate on the web, and these are information on our habits. And so we are exposed to this, and the risk, we run the risk of being manipulated, and especially being or oriented in our behaviors. This is important. He himself says, and we'll see that in another slide. It's a little bit, I have some doubts. Also, when They invented the we close a door. We need to learn how to close the door of our privacy. Yes, but who can do it? How can you do it? In the hands of whom? And I do not see. While I can see the I've seen films of espionage. Even when I turn on the great criminals, they destroy the cell, and it's not enough to turn it off. I did not know that. I didn't know it was enough to just turn your phone off. If I saw it, I would understand. Yes, we need to take out the battery outside and throw it inside in order to, in those science fiction espionage films. It's not just turning off or the phone. That's not enough to prevent spying. Even a turned off phone, it can be spied through. Okay, no, his driver had a cell without a battery, right? There's some reason. I saw it in films. I understood why. It's turned off, but if it's turned off, no, because even if it's off, and it's true because we speak about with Siri, and we say, go there, go here with Siri, do this for me. It's clear that Siri, it's not that, okay, there's someone, we all know, we have all experienced the fact that it's enough a couple times, but I've also noticed when I speak when I speak about something and some subject, and then an ad comes to you on this is the risk that we have now. That when you speak about something on the internet, when you're close to your cell phone, then you'll immediately, it's not just by chance that you receive advertisements about this. Now, Akoto said that we need to learn to close the digital port, like when and to close the blinds so that people don't see us from the outside in our house. We need to acquire these capacities. Okay. And how can we do that? With antiviruses, but I don't think that that's going to be enough any longer. That's the issue. Okay. Now, Priscilla. This is another author who's very interesting, who's a Roman philosopher at the Gregorian University of the Jesuits, Reggio Priscilla. He deals with themes which are connected to philosophy of contemporaneous world and logic and knowledge of truth, and also okay, a second, he published an article entitled Philosophy of the Metaverse Between Gnosticism and Cyberpunk, or Gnosis and Cyberpunk. It's interesting because he tells us that the announcement, which is also created with a enormous sophistication of a stupendous video. And then when you see it for the first time, you end up by saying, okay, where do I have to stop to go to paradise? Zuckerberg says, because really, what a wonderful thing. He says, the mind and life were like this. Okay. He starts out with Priscilla in his article, the prophetic tone of the founder of Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg. His announcement aims at a new phase of digital change in which to connect with, in a permanent world, the virtual and real world together. But what new is in all of this? What's new in all of this? A reflection regarding the cultural framework of the metaverse. Okay. Okay. They aim to a new phase of digital phase, which in a virtual and permanent and real way could connect to. Okay. Also there, we try to understand metaverse is not only, that is, it's not to transfer ourselves to the virtual world. It becomes a reality, and the realistic vision of the metaverse is a mixed reality. It's a reality in which the real and virtual, they remain. There are ways of communications between the two realities. Then later on, we'll see what the problems, some points of problems, and certain intuitions that we may be able to make. Now, what is new in all this? And therefore, he furnishes for us this kind of cultural reflection of what the important points would be of this expression. He reminds us the expression that comes from the novel of Neil Stevenson. And he understands the metaverse. Oh, sorry. The expression comes from the novel Snow Crash of Neil Stevenson in 1992, a virtual 3D world in which virtual experiences are mixed and they to those which are real. And then 1984, the neuro lover, William Gibson, when it spoke of its matrix, which was the source of inspiration for the creators of the digital network, including the internet. Okay, and there's a cyberpunk literature, which does not so much represent a critical voice against technological progress, but it is rather its interpreter, the son of its time, rather than the father of a future time, with science fiction, which is very okay, in harmony with the musical phenomenon from which it takes its name. Cyberpunk has given consistence to an interesting and ramified subculture, which um, literature, comic books, animated cartoons, films, and video games. The Japanese have a cultural tradition which aims to these works. Okay. A first conclusion, which this author poses, is that if all of these works are these make up this milieu of the metaverse, and they are the sons of the epoch of globalization and technological progress, it's difficult to see in the metaverse itself something that transcends this epoch. That is a first consideration we can make. A first conclusion is that he says that careful to not go and emphasize it as if the metaverse were something that's really transient to reality, or as if it were a dimension because it's virtual and that's different from the real world. And he says it's difficult to see that a metaverse would be something that transcends this epoch and a kind of openness towards the future. Okay, he takes up again he gives us a definition of the aspect of the roadmapmetaverse.org, which is a whole, it's a page, This page is institutional page, metaverseroadmap.org, and there's it lists events in the it's a convergence of a physical reality that's virtually improved and a virtual space that's physically persistent. Okay, so it's a kind of fusion of both of these aspects, which allows the users to have an experience of one and the other aspect. Okay, of both aspects. So the philosophical question that a philosopher might ask us is, okay, therefore, now this metaverse, what is it? In reality, this definition, TSD. What is TSD? What are you? Now, second conclusion is that the definitions are descriptions. That definitions are descriptions. They furnish and help us to it what the metaverse is if it were to function. We have, therefore, the sensation that the metaverse is more than anything a great advertising message, and it has been evidently in the past, and it is evident, and the message advertising that we see underlying it, and how can it construct the narrative, that is the story of what is being done rather than what is real. In fact, Zuckerberg, he chooses a prophetic tone when he's in his letter of the founder from 2008 and to 2021. Sorry, the 8th of October. Okay, where he announces the metaverse, and he says the internet is going to be something where the user is inside of an experience. He doesn't look at simply from the outside. The metaverse would be defined as a quality of everything that where we want to express. Okay, the next chapter of the internet will be something which the user is inside of the experience, not looking at it externally simply. The metaverse will be defined as a quality of everything, a presence. In the end, we want to aim to an experience that involves the whole person. This kind of choosing of a propheticizing tone. Now, is the metaverse virtual? Now we know, he says, that the virtual is not less real. And we can say that also, not meant to mention issues that we'll deal with later on, okay, in our course, including all the development of the blockchain and all the economic issue in these virtual spaces, okay? They have very important repercussions in the real world. Now, when you hear someone that says, that it's better to have a real friendship than a Facebook friendship. It makes me giggle and laugh. It's not that the virtual experience is less real. Everything that concerns the digital world is absolutely real. And when you're online, it's not less real than when you interact with people another way. From the subject point of view, there's just a mode. The mode is different of the experience is different. That's the only thing that's different. Significantly, which is limited from the point of view of sensorial point of view. This is true also for any type of experience, whether you're in when you're reading a symphony and or reading a novel, our imagination is involved. They're still real. The metaverse proposes an immersion which is much more sophisticated and attractive, and also with phenomena of psychological alterations that we need to take into consideration. The digital change does not bring us to extra real experience. Rather, it redefines our concept of reality. For us, an experience of the past could be real only if we can we can understand it, if we can find an explanation of its reasons. Farsi un marea. Now, the illusion mysteries, okay, where they made use of psychedelic substances in antiquity, our comprehension of that type of event pass through hypotheses that connect participation and the taking up those who participate in those rites. For us, that experience can be real only if we can make sense of it. This is interesting also. Only if we can make sense of it, if we can find an explanation of the reason for which people participated or believed in those rites, the illusion mysteries. Okay, today we have it clear that the virtual world is that which seems real to us under certain aspects. We can see it, we can feel it, etc., etc. That's the real, sorry, which does not have a physical, normal counterpart. Sorry, that's a virtual world. We can, if we see something on a 3D or 2D image, it's not three-dimensional, but there are. Okay, if we hear a sound, etc., etc. Virtual reality is a reality which is partial reality, and at the same time, it's fixed on, and this is what's played on a lot. The subjective perception is focused on some aspects. This is okay, but others who are not part of virtual experience passed into second level, in second place. Yeah, for example, immersion in a video game, which corresponds also to the sensations or perceptions of suspension of credibility, or thanks to the fact that the game is sufficiently realistic. Okay, reality, a game requires much more concentration, can have the same effect. A player of chess, for example, can completely concentrate on his game without perceiving.
E queste sono anche le esperienze, la concentrazione e di attenzione effettivamente, e quello viene portato poi.
You can lose, even a chess player can lose consciousness of his surroundings if he gets completely involved or in the zone when he's playing. No.
Che diciamo viene sollecitata proprio da.
Okay, sleight of hand, for example, relies on this and gives you the illusion of this is another shit. No, a good virtual reality does not have to be more realistic. It has to be sufficient to involve the person who experiences it. Experience concerns typically reality. We already spoke about time, especially. The whole subject of time. Those who frequently play in virtual reality can spend a lot of time without realizing it. But this also involves the involvement of the experience. This is depending on that. The metaverse, therefore, aims to reduce both effects of the virtual world. On the one hand, it intends to be an integrated an experience that's integrated with the real, which is not distinctive, but permits us to use virtual or real objects. one after another. We experience something like that in a very primitive way when we use, for example, on the telephone, and we fix appointments, when we make appointments or through digital means or the smartphone. And we fluidly go from problems of physical flame. There are things that only exist in our digital world regarding our future activities. In this way, we interact only through a appropriate interface object like a keyboard, etc. Okay, the metaverse aims to, the third conclusion here is that the metaverse aims to reduce both of the effects of the virtual world. It intends to be an integrated experience with the real world, and that is not separated and distinct from it, but it permits us to flow from virtual to real objects, which are real in continuation. Now, a new phase, is this a new phase of the digital change, Is it? Effectively, he says to us that in order to understand the project of the metaverse, we need to look at another narration, another way of storytelling, which is of a conceptual type. The computer appears as an automatic calculating machine, the calculator. The theme of calculation will emerge in another author. The idea of machines carrying out computations in our place. Now, the epoch in which computers are asked to give answers to problems, calculations, and questions that for a human being would be difficult to obtain in a short amount of time. So we could say the phase of calculator of the first epoch of information age. The calculator operates on the basis of received programs, which it processes data that it is asked to give foreseen responses to. In this phase, the science fiction, like in cyberpunk, which is the son of his time, made imagine that computer could become a man in space, or in Space Odyssey in 2001, a Space Odyssey film from 1969, to desire a form of free will. But a super calculator is nothing more than a double of another man. And same that we see in the Gnostic saga, Dune, okay, where the mentats are calculators, living calculators, given that for religious reasons, they cannot construe. It's not allowed to. The first commandment of the religion is that you cannot create a machine in the image of the human mind. Imagine a kind of superhero. Okay, story with extraordinary capacity of calculation, but in daily life is just an instrument. This would be first phase. Today, find ourselves in another phase, a second phase, in which we can call a second phase of digital change. It's not a change of imaginary paradigm of the computer, which changes the relationship between us and the instrument. That in daily life, human beings are not only longer just those who program calculators. Now, we've reached the input, where the input, which are the calculators. We have become the input, and which is useful for ChatGPT in order to be able to grow, and in order to be able to give and develop, and to be able to give the best answers to other users. So at the same time, we are immersed, we can say, in that way, into a great social experiment. We could say that this is the second phase, which is very interesting, where we ourselves become, with data that we emit, with interactions that we have, and the answers with the answers that we give, with the connections that we make, and the what could we ask ourselves on Facebook without the likes and the likes that we make, and the photos that we give, and the phrases that we post. At the same time, there's Facebook. It feeds itself with this, and the algorithms, then the more sophisticated algorithms, which imitate natural human language, they increase what we ourselves and the corrections that we make of ourselves. This GPT chat creates, when I ask it something, and I say to it that you've made a mistake, it doesn't know what to call it in English. It says it. I say hit, and it makes it corrects itself, and it says it's sorry. And then it finds other sources, and you say you're like, what is your source? And it says, okay, I made a mistake, therefore, and that gives you the answer, and you say that's the right answer. Okay, it's trying, etc. And we become like instruments also of this phase of the internet. The same thing is true, for example, on with the Google search algorithms, and it enriches itself with contents and searches. Computers have always been reprogrammed by human beings. However, their task is more and more to take the measures. This would be the dream of Zuckerberg, and also Zuckerberg's dream, because an interface that's completely immersive and that it's almost invisible, it must be according to the third law of Clarke, which is indistinguishable from magic. It's very interesting here because Clarke was a great a British writer who wrote in 2008, I believe, about he laid down three interesting laws. These very interesting laws of Clarke. Three interesting laws, and he says, Clarke, these three laws. The first is very nice, very cute. He says, when a computer. Okay. He says. Okay, second law, the only way to discover limits of the possible is to go a little bit beyond the impossible. And third law was that any technology that's sufficiently advanced is indistinguishable from magic. In fact, this third law then became particularly famous and inspired a great number of colored variants, among which other laws on parallel worlds and extraterrestrial life, etc. The author says that it must function for me without me knowing how and why that magic is that phenomenon. Okay, it's possible through realization of interfaces that are more and more connected to our bodies and less connected to our concepts. That is, the input, sensorial input, multiply or necessary passage to create a three-dimensional reality among which happens with the odors and colors, especially that the control system is important. We saw regarding facial expressions function, and also to unblock iPhones, and also to jail Chinese dissidents. Another author says is that the technology is not good or bad, and it's not neutral either. And he cites the first law of Krentzberg, and this is another historical American historian who lays down 6 laws on technology, which this is very interesting here. The first of these laws was this: technology is not good or bad. It's not even, but it's not neutral either. Okay, the others are inventions. They are the mothers of necessity. Technology involves bigger as well. Though technology can be a fundamental element in very many political factors. Technology elements have precedence over technological and political. All stories are history of technology is the most relevant. All the 6th is that technology is a real human activity, just like history of technology is. Okay, invention is the mother of necessity. It helps us to understand the passage from the first to the second phase of digital change, when computers become a consumer good, the consumer good, which is most widely spread on the world. It's brought us to a series of changes. The second law tells us that the social networks are nothing more than a development, further development and spreading of extraordinary calculation machines, and we can guarantee the effectivity of one's own advertising without computers being able to calculate its effects. Like, okay, could not. Which are measured during every event, a streaming event. Okay, the massive use of digital technology has already changed in a radical way, even if not yet definitive and causal way, have changed our life. Okay, the metaverse has the ambition and the objective to exploit, and to bring it to a further step, to bring us to a full interaction with the digital world, and the world which is governed by exchange of information between human beings and digital agents, which are called Inforg, which are made of carbon and silicon. From this point of view, we have the first outlines of the universe, the production, literary production, and also films, cinematographic works, which are inspired. We've already mentioned this. And then the author shows us how the metaverse becomes a kind of illusion, consensual illusion, which can involve technological and social and political issues. Now let's move on to a great philosopher, Luciano Floridi, philosopher. He's an information philosopher. He's your colleague in the Academy of Life, the Pontifical Academy of Life. I think that you know him well, but he's Roman. He's a Roman from Rome, really. He got a degree at the Sapienza University, and now he teaches at Oxford. Okay, Lucia, yeah. He was born in Bologna. Okay, no, I'm sure. Okay, let's say one of the first Italian philosophers who put his studies and research centered on the problems and questions regarding technology and advancement of technology and of artificial and of AI. He coined this term, no life, which is hybrid between on life and life. Sorry, he coined it happily because it's a topos that recurs a lot, and it well illustrates the question. And his it's not a program, his interview, which he did with many authors, and he calls it Fabrica Floridi, with it's very nice, and you can find it on YouTube. I think it has a specific channel. Okay, he investigated the metaverse, you could say, and he calls it to witness of how information, and he brought in many other scholars to deal with this, and he took a look at his talks were very interesting and explained a lot. We took a look at them, and one of these is Luca Colombo, that he took a look at, an author who is very important. He wrote a lot on this issue. And what does he tell us? He says that the metaverse is the internet of the future. Okay, this we've already said that, but what we are doing now today with the PC or with iPhone, question. We'll later on tomorrow we'll do that with instruments, tools that we wear on our bodies. What does this mean? It means that we will not need any tools. The interface, the Internet of Things, as we earlier defined it, will not be useful for us any longer. But probably this is the thing that what he said underlies. He said we won't need a virtual reality helmet even. Why? Because technology will go forward also in that sense, that direction. The narration goes more quickly than science. And if we see that famous Black Mirror TV series, there you already see what the metaverse is. But they don't have helmets. They have little lens in their eye, in front of their eye, of a contact lens. In reality, it's there and puts them in contact with through a contact lens. And that's it. That's the direction probably that we're going, and how we saw many times in previous years when we dealt with the subject of robotics. We found ourselves at the end to speak about robotics in terms in which 10 years ago spoke about science fiction, that things will happen. Unfortunately, they will be true also regarding the metaverse. All of those TV series that speak to us of a future world will probably be what will happen. We spoke about this yesterday. Last one is Inverse, the TV series Inverse. Sorry, and that's a moment beyond what. They don't have the helmet any longer. They have a metal corn, which directly intervenes in the medical field of our neurons, and it projects the images of the virtual world, not through sight, but directly to the neurons of our brain. And that would be the second step. I perfectly know that we saw it in other frameworks, which in the military field, they're trying to do that already. They're talking about the possibility of a pilot to be able to see, to think, and to act, act because the medium, the visual medium, slows down because consciousness. He directly interfaces with these instruments. This is one of the objectives that is being carried out right now. Maybe, okay, in the military field, that's being practiced now. Okay, no. Moyoli is another person who was interviewed, and he says that the metaverse goes on beyond the hybridization between man and machine. Man is immersed in technology instead, in a virtual world, which is in connect, and he's personalized, and we'll see that later on, in a community. It intends to satisfy its own needs also, and here, this is a very important point here, thanks to technology, 5G technology, which tends to limit the slowness of movement. Why is this important? Because if I saw this, I can attest to this a few days ago in my in a physical therapy session that I had. It was a video game that I did. I put a helmet on and with on my back, and I destroy certain. He put the visor over me, and I moved my arm according to what he made me do. So it was very, very useful. That we also did the other time with Dr. Yosa, who uses the metaverse in Santa Lucia Hospital to re-educate certain illnesses now. Okay, latency, the moment in which I move my hand and I see myself in the helmet, if it is not the visor, if it is not at the speed of light, in jargon, you realize that there's a problem. There's the latency of movement. No. Now, the idea, the possibility of this problem is 5G. Good. So we would see, Heidegger said this in the question of technology. Technology calls technology. Okay, technology needs a further development of technology. So 5G becomes essential in this application here, because without the elimination of that lag, it would be impossible to verify and to carry out the metaverse, to actuate the speed of transmission of latency, and the massive the quantity of data that can be processed, incredibly increase the work capacity of all this. We calculate that in a few years we will reach 6 billion. Okay, a population. Today we're about 8 billion. That we can think of what percentage of persons who are connected there will be. That could be. So Floridi, this author here, he highlights the importance of this lag in the development of the metaverse, this lag regarding the modality with which we perceive the world. Because we synchronize ourselves with the world. If we have to calculate a mosquito or a wasp, and we synchronize with ourselves, and by realizing that movement and that lapse of time allows me to intercept the flight of the mosquito, because we synchronized this last time we mentioned time and space, and the a priori of Kant that allowed us to realize the world, and by seeing it according to the laws of Newtonian science. This is why it's important to go regarding the computational capacity of 5G, and to understand why states the whole polemic regarding 5Gs and 5G, and why certain people say that whether or not 5G is good or not. No, there more and more people spend time connected online on life, so to speak. And the digital and physical world are more and more competing with each other. And it's not that I turn on internet; I enter into the internet the other day, and it will be a life which is integrated. And the difference from the physical and digital will be more and more blurred. Okay. I have here Luca Monte. This is he's a manager, I think, of human resources, which deals with training in a great company of communication. And he said that, without a problem and very clearly and openly, and it makes you laugh because he says that the mentality of a worker in information technology is structured. He is always oriented to the satisfaction of new needs, and therefore it becomes essential in this. The problem of the low of massiveness, that is the sweet speed with which we answer this, and the massivity, the capacity to develop quantities of data, because the needs of persons, which are at the center of this world, is made up of questions and of demand and supply and of merchandising, and is almost they do not hide this because needs are in continuous development. They are created needs. We did not have needs very long of this type. These needs were imposed on us because the market asks this of us, and the workers of the market are they're information information managers, and they intercept these needs, these new needs. Also, thanks to these network experience, which are these customer experiences, which are made up of data that users generate and put online. So from our information movements and our requests, they create these algorithms, study us and create sources and answers to these new needs. Because there's a logic of capitalization of data patrimony. It becomes a patrimony, a source of wealth, which users make available online, and the metaverse is further enriched with. Certainly. Data, okay, that we in our behaviors, daily behaviors, we feed this, because a client generates the information patrimony, which is connected to interests that will constitute the history of the individual himself, and will render him recognizable to all the metaverse environment frame of platforms in which he accesses, where certain virtual objects will be sold maybe in the future of Mr. X. You will be there with your identity and with your avatar. Then we enter into the metaverse, Mr. XX. It will still be you. And there they will send your identity. If they are very close to you, there's a lot of solidarity. No, this is the whole discussion. Okay, now, in fact, this process will increase the capacity of satisfying of new needs more and more, because this is underneath this discussion. There's a whole other type of criticism that's made on the anthropological and political and social level. Someone who says the metaverse is a cipher of this new capitalism, which is going forward. Capitalism, which is made out of nothing. If we do not face it, book, in fact, does not produce anything. Though it's the only one. 2 years ago. Okay. No. I remember in the lesson that I did 2 years ago when we were in the middle of COVID, we exploited this dynamic, and we saw that everything was down. The American stock market, etc. The only ones who invested were Facebook. They increased. What do they produce, you might ask? No, nothing. Why do you invest in this? But they increased by 200% in their value. we realized then that even the American Nasdaq is it doesn't follow other indicators, and there's a whole dialectic there, and the social level and anthropological level and political level. Obviously, that is not our task to analyze that right now, and this is a good algorithm. This image highlights the tendency of the next author, which we will sum up because would have a lot of other things that we could say about this. The cipher of the living body. No, contemporary author makes one criticism, which is very, very interesting in this little book here, which is very dense and not simple to read. He's a great Italian philosopher, Eugenio Mozzarella. He is a philosopher, a poet, and a political scientist, and he works at the Federico II University in Naples, and he teaches at the Athenaeum down there, and he's been a deputy in the 16th legislature. Was a deputy of the Republic. He writes this book against the metaverse, save presence, and the whole issue of presence, which is analyzed when someone wrote a synopsis of this book and took a Mozzarella wrote this, and he sums it up that the metaverse, he expresses it as a digital of euthanasia metaverse is what will be realized when it is one of the big problems is interoperativity. What the idea that we do not today have the technological possibility to because the avatars themselves pass from one space to another without having to taking away the visor and collecting myself. It's like when I go from Teams to my account, my Teams account, the Athenaeum at the University of Rome, or through Gmail, or I have to open Zoom, etc., etc. All of these platforms are separated from each other. Today, all of these virtual spaces are separated. That is, you play on the one hand on your virtual games, and then you create pseudo spaces and work another plan. The great objective is interoperativity, but to render interoperativity possible, you need to come to agreements. That is, we have to create a single thing and allow that all of these companies come to agreement with each other. In this volume, it's very interesting. The euthanasia of human metaverse, the euthanasia of humanity. Polemic pamphlet. It's a very fierce reflection and well argued analysis of this new phenomenon, the metaverse. And he says the following. This is a quote here: "Commercial ambitions of the metaverse disseminate a wind in a storm which is already happening in the crisis of the presence of and a save that needs to be saved within a more and more hyper-connected reality. A scenario that brings us to ask ourselves if the servo sterzo, who's a volante del sistema non de servo sterzo." Okay, we're not going to be able to take a look at all of this. Servo sterzo. The first chapter is called after Facebook, the new gospel of Zuckerberg, the metaverse, promises us to the completion of hybrid life, but enhanced life of on life, the full transitivity, thanks to the digital world and artificial intelligence of the real world and the virtual world, an anthropological shock for whom many do not see the true danger in this post-human dystopia. That is the Gorgon effect, because of the Gorgon effect, the black hole, online black hole that devours offline reality and life as such, which is ungoverned. The digital era, without making man lost, it risks removing the human from itself and its environment in name of a epological, sorry, of an artificial AI, in the name of an AI deception that intends to hand over the humanity to a government, a network of government or internet of government and control, rather than giving him more world, more freedom. As we are immersed in this dystopia, the only possible exit route is to save presence. Now, we need to become conscious of what it means to live in a digital world, an infosphere, and an on life. That is us, our experience. Thanks to IA and digital technologies, we live immersed in a virtual network, anthropological shock, which must the anthropological shock is due to a change of perception of the world and of ourselves. Okay, he says that the development of technological, there are three thresholds. The first, which we went beyond through nuclear fission. The second is biotechnological. The third is that at the digital level. The new nuclear fission allows us to pass from the threshold of how we perceive ourselves and enter into an environment, a mental environment. There is the and manipulation of our perceptive frameworks. Metaverse could promise us a continuation of the experience of ourselves and to ourselves. And this is the dream of eternal life. The digital can bring us to a disability of our experience of presence, which is that which gives meaning to our lives. The End of the World by Ernesto Di Martino tells of a personal experience to an experience of existential disability, which comes about through a country person who loses his points of reference in a lived world. In an analogous way, this could be reproduced in the same way to mass numbers of human beings. We are incarnated spirits. This is very important to keep in mind.
Avvenuto ad un contadino che perse i riferimenti appunto del suo mondo vissuto. In modo analogo, oggi può prodursi lo stesso su masse umane.
The same thing that happened years ago to country people who moved into the cities in industrialization could happen today with the metaverse. That we would be completely lost and confused and bewildered, out of place, disoriented. Okay, these are the 7 capital sins: the sin of Facebook, the infosphere, save presence, jump of species, the deception of artificial quote unquote intelligence. This is an epical step. Stay tuned. We need to inhibit the metaverse.
La perdita o la visione di menti disincarnate e disincarnabili. È una pulsione neognostica o tecnognostica che vorrebbe superare un depauperamento dell'umano contemporaneo e in una materia fredda della nostra origine minerale e dimenticando che siamo spirito.
I forget that we are incarnated spirits and that our key element is life. And this life would become a life. He expresses this in a very beautiful way from bioetica, not because of bioethics, but bioetica in the sense that life is founded as bioethics in favor of the infosphere. Okay, he says that incarnation is a series. Incarnation of beings is still an ecosystem of relationships which are take on flesh. And he analyzes here what are the damages that these scenarios could give rise to. And we cannot take a look at them right now. But in the end, at the end of the volume, there's a whole disquisition on what happened while he was writing the book. It was during the pandemic, and this new digital expansion of human reality as a reality of presences goes against reality. It goes against reality. Reality was and is now the return to presence. Everything regarding online during the pandemic of touching and embracing and seeing the face, etc. And everything affirms and underlines the intrinsic necessity or value, or the intrinsic corporeal, tangible reality that we are. And he says in reality, both virtual reality and virtual and augmented reality are the two technologies that are the heart of the metaverse. And they are able to give rise to all, hello, also at the neural level, which is mediated and is always mediated by the experience of the body. Certainly, metaverse will be a transformative technology, which can also change cognitive aspects of persons who think what they think of reality. We can return to what the whole issue of saving presence. We need to return, and let's not allow that these discourses, these discussions, generate an environment or form of thinking that's post-human. Rather, let's try to govern and regulate the development of the metaverse in a direction that is basically in the service of concrete man, not carry out what he calls as the euthanasia of the human. And then we have this course material. Then there's the material regarding the chapter by chapter analysis of the sin of Facebook, which from sin, he says, of les vita, the sin of les vita, and the anthropological shock that would consist into digital re-utilization of reality, or fluidity, or the online experience. And therefore, these two experiences, which are constantly overlapped, and then the imperative that he proposes to save presence in a double aspects, present as temporal historic presence of the time, and present as that which can save, and that which needs to be saved, and which that the emergence of the situation of serious threats that we find ourselves in, which without being able to get rid of the algorithm or avoiding. And then the jump of species, he goes more deep of the transhumanist of dream. He criticizes it as a loss of human integrity and the integrity of the spirit as animal dependence, which is known and animated by ecological niche, which makes the self, or a psychosomatic integrity, which he calls the process metaverse as a kind of digital euthanasia of man as he's known now, which would be carried out, and what these authors, especially these futurologists, would like to do or like to aim at, reach even up to the epical, the intention to a vision of the algo or ethic. He says, let's not create an illusion of answering of ethical values or programs in the AI technology without there being a controller kind of self-consciousness of the value. And he points out the danger of use of these technologies, and then to inhibit the metaverse, as understood as a further digital expansion in the of the human reality as a reality of presence. Okay, very good. Now, our friend, he put them in the end. Benante, he is your colleague of the Pontifical Academy of Life, in addition to be a professor here at the Gregorian University of Rome in theology, moral theology, dogmatic. No, I would not like to exaggerate. I would like to affirm that his studies go back to more than 10 years ago regarding these topics. They opened the study of these themes regarding artificial intelligence, from which he began his studies on the world of cyber. It's a metaphor, as a metaphor of this attempt of man to modify his nature. No. First of all, we pose here the problem regarding the reality as it is defined. It's important. This reflection is important because all of our idea of information and of digitization begins with that experience, which he calls the Turing experiment. What did that experiment mean? It meant that Turing, it meant that the idea that for a person or a man who's in front of or behind or where there's a PC or a computer or a man or a screen in front of questions, both to man and a computer. There was the idea that at a certain point that this that man would manage to understand the difference of the answers between answers given by a computer versus those given by a man, up to the point that the computer would answer like a man, up to the point that there would be no difference between the answers between a computer and man. Man, in that moment, computer in that moment was the same as man, was indistinct from man, indistinguishable from man. The scholars today and visionaries today are looking for this to be reach that point, the difference between man and machine. And this is from the book of Turing, okay, on which all the race is based, on which the whole race is based, of the information and engineers and programmers, scholars in this field, or not in the metaverse. This is a very important issue. Is the metaverse is the opposite of that, though, in a certain sense. That is seen as we see it in reality. Why? Because it's between these two discussions. The analysis that's carried out regarding the research of research, which is done through reflection, Platonic research. Plato wrote that dialogue, the Republic, which he says, okay, which is downstream. Downstream. I meant to say earlier, not between. Okay, no. While man, who in the Turing experiment, the man who is behind the wall and who realizes the indifference and understands from indifference of certain things that the machine has become, as developed as man and as advanced as man. In the metaphor of Plato's cave, man goes beyond the wall to see reality, to understand it, and to see and to realize, because he does not trust its indifference and similarity. It's almost the opposite of this. Okay. Now, the knowledge of truth is not when the shadows are confused with reality, because they are sufficiently similar to real that they seem real. But the research, okay, man has the courage and a desire to go beyond the appearance and dox, as it's defined in ancient Greek, where he speaks of this box, and he analyzes the difference between appearance and reality. Okay, and he verifies what it is. TST. These are the Greek words. When he speaks of philosophy, you need to TST. Okay. You need to learn Greek and German when you speak of philosophy, otherwise you can't really study it. Okay. Okay, we're just joking here. Now, there's this TST. What is it in philosophy, which it needs to be looked for? This anthropological question of what it is, what something is, which should be looked for not in the shadow of things, but it needs to be seeked out in seeing and going beyond this wall. And let's see that, and we see that this metaverse coincides, once we go beyond the wall perfectly, with, if it coincides with reality, then we would have reached at that point that singularity, these visionaries of plasma humanity, and of other currents of thought are trying to reach. Now here, there's much more than that. The metaverse goes beyond reality because it forms it, because reality is not what is represented or depicted. It's it's depicted, but it's not only that, but it's also built. It's built at our pleasure. We can put into the space what we want, and this is why it's better than that reality that is presented to us through from between constructed reality, as if it were that to which we all aspire, to the real reality that our life is made up of which is made up of difficulties and bitterness and ideals. This is why this maybe this attempt to go to in that direction, because we put a helmet on, it'd be easy to flee our reality that surrounds us. We see maybe soon we will not even maybe need helmets. We've seen that maybe just through a contact lens. This metaverse would be so nice that it would deceive our it was so beautiful that it would deceive our sense that we can be more real than reality itself. But there's a problem here, that in the cavern, in the observers are chained. They are prisoners. They are not free. As people say, they are slaves. So are we slaves today? Because if the metaphor is true, it should always be true. If we are slaves, where are our chains? We say probably the chains is this world, this virtual world that is pushing us towards a condition which is totally virtual. Maybe it would be perfect. Why would we? Maybe we'd be perfect slaves because we would not be aware that we are slaves. We would not know. We did not know. And even the slaves in the Platonic myth of the cave, and we don't want to break our chains, and we consider a person crazy whoever tries to go beyond the wall and to see reality as it, and return and tell us, so look, that this is not reality. Reality is something else, and we even kill him at the end, and he will end up badly. We'll end up dead because everyone will think we're crazy. So this is the substance of what is said to us. Now, what's being said to us here is that the world in which the metaphysics and this world that we see today, in this world, the metaverse, is worth as much as reality. This is a sophisticated, naturalistic expression of if what's not seen, then everything is included. Okay, no, there's a reflection that we need to highlight here and underline, which is kind of the last passage of his reflections. Okay, 20 years ago, there was a nice example from that New York mayor who built this great road, but in his idea, there was an attempt to isolate certain neighborhoods by white middle class, allowing to go into certain neighborhoods and not others. What did he do? We're talking about redlining. Okay, made certain roads that went to the sea, of the sea that was close to the city. They wanted to reserve only to wealthy people, like in Rome. There are these neighborhoods where there's a rich group of people. What did he do? He lowered the level of the roads from one to another, so that you could not go from one to the other with bus. Only those who could go there who had a car. So he made a selection in a subtle way. Why? Because he had the possibilities to do it with technology and with by building certain roads. He did that by making roads that only were accessible to cars and not public transport. And that way he made a stratification of economically speaking, and only made certain places accessible to the rich. Okay. And now the form of power that we're seeing here, what does it do? It's also a disposition of the powers of government and society to give form and order to the world. Therefore, implies the necessity to ask questions of technology and ask what the value of that social, what's inside of that social pact that we call the Constitution, which is involves the world of regulation and of rights and the law. Because our duty is to look at the digital world as something that effectively has an impact on our way of living, history, and the world. our risk that we run is that the metaverse can become a kind of development that we identified earlier of artificial paradises, which are created by drugs, which bring us to hallucination. It's kind of escape from reality. It's not induced by technology, but by pharmacological in the case of drugs. In the case of no, there are digital artificiality creates an escape. We have to be careful that this transformation of the man, this new field that is being generated now, that it not pass through an improvement of our well-being because of a due enforced act and unavoidable act where calling into question identity is really a step forward to emancipation, history of criminalization of thingness of or quiddity of material. This is a greater risk that we need to be careful that we do not run. Is this real progress? We need to ask ourselves: are we progressing the moment in which, when our corporeity, our bodies, and our subjectivity, our individuality, and we're annihilating it and destructuring it? And that's another theme of the philosophy of the 20th century dealt with this is maybe the biggest risk that we run. Development of an ideology, transhumanistic coincides with this, which aims to the freeing of consciousness from the body up to the point of consciousness itself, that it be reduced to a flow of digital information that can be seen and uploaded into information occasional machine. Man in this vision risks becoming merely a expression of culture without form and unfortunately without identity. I think that we have reached our time. I think at least I have. Yes, we've gone beyond. Okay, there are a lot of other things we could talk about, but we'll return to this, don't worry. We'll come back to this. We'll come back to this in other seminars, certainly. We have a lot, there's a lot more we could say about this. In the presentation, we have made some very interesting reflections on the theme of a correlated philosophy. I'd like to conclude with a very interesting article here. Okay, I'm going to show it. I'll show it to you here on the screen very quickly. It's very interesting. And then we can close. Okay, ragazzi. Okay, here. Evandro Ragazzi regarding techno-science. In 1998, he wrote the Techno-Science and the Identity of Contemporary Man. He sums up that basically the question of is the loss of the crisis of identity and the theme, the whole issue of the whole theme of the whole subject, the whole issue of the whole topic of the great deep loss of the central question of man, what man is, who man is. In this text, the great philosopher of science, Agazzi makes a reflection on the epistemological status of the change of epoch that we're living in and the mentality that we are associating with, and also the paradigms and the false illusions that we see and that we attribute and anthropological characteristics, which are technological factors and also information aspects, and how the whole ethical discussion and the moral discussion issue emerges as a necessity, a deep necessity of the crisis in which we find ourselves now. Okay, very good. I would say that we can conclude there, and this part and this long afternoon. Our next appointments will be in March within the World Day of the Brain, which go from the 18th of March. We'll have various events during that World Day of the Brain, and then we will also have other events which will happen, which will be promoted. We will give you the news. We'll tell you through the newsletter, and we will deal with the scenario, the psychological and psychiatric scenarios. And we'll speak about the metaverse and augmented reality and the scenario which are connected more to the field of virtual and the augmented reality in the sector of travel sector, in various fields concerning certain applications, concrete applications. We'll see then, we'll take a look at other sectors. There will be many, and then we'll touch on issue in May regarding questions that are more connected to law and rights, and then we'll conclude with theological reflection in June. Now here, thanks for your attention and the participants, and thanks for the attention of being here present physically, those who are, and also online. And we'll meet again in May through our new letter. I greet everyone who is connected, and let's hope that we hope to be able to see each other, if not online through the Zoom platform, but open, and maybe one day we'll open in the World Day of the Brain where everyone can participate, at least to see each other through the video and Zoom. So thank you for your patience, and thank you for your attention. Okay, and we will meet again, and we'll meet again soon. Okay, we'll meet again soon. Okay, thank you very much.